The North Gauteng High Court yesterday granted President Cyril Ramaphosa an interdict suspending the enforcement of the Public Protector's remedial action against him. Now, Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane did not oppose Ramaphosa's court application, and she found that the President deliberately misled Parliament about a 500,000 rand donation to his CR17 campaign from Bosasa. Mkhwebane ordered the National Prosecuting Authority to investigate Ramaphosa for what she called prima facie evidence of money laundering. Now, the president, however, argued that his campaign was above board and that Mkhwebane had obtained the information illegally. And joining us now is political analyst Mathekga to talk about this unfolding story. Good to see you, Ralph. So, are you surprised by the latest developments in this whole saga?
Thanks for inviting me, Sakina. It's not quite a surprise. I mean, it was highly likely yesterday that the court will grant that interdict because it was unopposed and there was no need for the court to engage in back and forth. There was no opposition, so it was clear that it was going to be granted. But the issue of substance still remains, which is the question of the campaign finance. And I think that as I observe the public and, observe what is being said out there in the public, I also think that the public mood is gradually shifting to, people almost saying that, yes, Mr. President, there are challenges with the report and so forth, but the question of the finance seems to be unattended and it needs to be attended. We know that the law is still silent about the process through which internal, I would say, campaign will be regulated within the ANC. The law is silent on that. But politically, I think it is very clear that the president should come forth and explain this. What worries me, Sakina, about this is that denying it or not willing to disclose who funded you, it doesn't help, because at the end of the day, you are already dealing with the political consequences of the people who funded you. There is already this perception that the president is in the pocket of some of the people and so forth. And those suspicions are not generally unfounded because we come from that era. So the president is already dealing with the consequences of this anyway. There is no benefit that is brought by continued insistence of not disclosing who funded this. Why don't you just disclose and let's deal with it politically and get it over with, instead of remaining behind the legal curtain that says people have got no right to know about it, and knowing exactly that politically people are actually entitled to that knowledge politically. Maybe not legally, but politically they are.
So as you say, even though legislatively there may not be any clear guidelines with regard to what is supposed to happen, how these things are supposed to unfold, but the perception is all important. And looking at how the president has played it up until now, starting from the beginning, when the question is asked in Parliament regarding this 500,000 rand donation from Bosasa, talk about how the president handled that and how perhaps he could have handled it better.
I mean, maybe the best thing for the president by then should have been to defer, to say that instead of giving a categorical answer, where the president categorically said that he did not receive the money, and evidence came out showing that he received the money, and more evidence came out in the email showing that there was no way that he could not have known about that money. The emails are showing, the leaked emails are showing that the president should have known about that. But again, even if it were not in the email, Sakina, where I'm standing is that campaign finance is such a critical issue that you need to know about it. I mean, it is quite interesting that such material information relating to one's political career, and one says that they did not know who donated. I mean, that is the most critical issue. I often ask, if you don't know this material information and you are willing to come out and say you do not know the details such, my question is, what is it that you know then? I mean, because if you don't know who's giving you money, what is it that you know about your campaign? And on the backdrop of the fact that the president factually received money from Bosasa, it is not baseless for people to suspect that there could be more controversies around this. And the best way to remove it, because you started off badly, it is actually to come out and fully disclose and deal with the political consequences. The political train out of this is coming your way anyway. So the best way to deal with it is to deal with it with dignity, instead of being compelled, instead of disclosing because the court refused to protect that secrecy. When you get to that level where you are being compelled by legislation, your bona fide is becoming, we're doubting as to whether are you really committed to accountability, or are you only willing to account when the law compels you to do so? Those are two different, I think, platforms from which to act.
And we'll come back to that in a moment. But, you know, that is the courts and the legalities around this particular matter. There is, of course, a separate process that involves Parliament.
Yeah.
And calling into question, of course, the President's conduct in Parliament.
Yes.
And whether he, in fact, lied to that august House. So what's your view on that?
I wouldn't say lied, but I would say that he was very negligent in answering that question. Because I do not know if indeed the president did not know about that, although indications are that he should have known. Even if suppose he was honest in his answer, that still points to serious negligence on the part of a leader who is not making himself aware of material evidence that I think are material to his political career. So that is a separate question that has to be dealt with. And again, Sakina, it's because we are so much divided. For me, if the president lied, it is something that is forgivable in relation to this. I do not see a deep, sinister intention to deceive here. But what I'm worried about is that resistance to just say, I got it wrong, I apologize. And Parliament can sanction the president. Sanction does not necessarily mean dismissal. We tend to be thinking of this thing in two ways, where the president escapes culpability because he would have won the legal case and therefore does not have to pursue the political route of accounting. I think that is quite wrong. For me, the president can take the middle line, accepting that, look, I got it wrong. I should have known better, actually coming against the backdrop of perception of undue influence of illicit money in our politics. I should have known better. I apologize. And Parliament then can look into that and maybe sanction the president, that president, it's wrong. It does not mean a sanction should result in the dismissal.
But it's now snowballed.
It looks as if also the resistance of the president to actually admit as well, one must understand as well, and I'm trying to be sympathetic here, to say the resistance to admit to what initially was not such a gross error of misrepresenting donation from Bosasa. I think it is also because of the calculation that if I accept this error, I'm going to be severely weakened within the ANC. Then you end up being stubborn on an issue that snowball becomes actually bigger than what it ought to be. Maybe at the center of this, Sakina, it's not the legalities. Maybe we are trying to litigate on policy differences within the different. If you litigate political differences, you'll never get to a solution, because litigation is not a way to deal with the differences within the ANC. The issue is the mistrust. Does the president trust his own comrades that they can forgive him on an error that I think is forgivable? And for me, the answer is no. That is why you are seeing people digging in their heels. I mean, imagine how would the whole thing would have turned out had the president went to the public protector much earlier and said that, before you can even come up with this report, can you just include there that I concede as part of your report that it was an error on my part? This thing would not have gone to where it is. By now, the bigger part of it now, it's dealt with through leaks and so forth. It's out of control. It should not have gotten to where it is.
So where we are right now, coming back to the court battle now, and it literally has become a battle between the president and the public protector.
Yes.
And looking at these latest developments, first and foremost, let's just draw a distinction between the political battle and, of course, the legal battle in this instance.
The legalities is that the president did not issue an accurate statement in Parliament. But Sakina, do we criminalize political statements in our society as well? We should talk about that as well, because at the end of the day, if we want to criminalize political statement, it becomes difficult for politicians to operate. If a politician issues a statement in error, such as it is the case with the president in Parliament, that has got to do with legalities. You cannot lie in Parliament because one is expected to be operating under oath in Parliament. You apologize from that. But because we are so divided...
Let me just quiz you on that for a second. When you say that what did you say? He lied in error?
I want to say the statement was inaccurate, no doubt. The statement he has issued was not the truth. But I do not know the intention. You see, when you start saying someone lied, you are actually going into the intention of, was there an intention to deceive? It could be because the president was negligent. The thing is that you cannot walk scot-free. Either you accept to just that lying, or you accept to gross error in handling your own affairs, you have to concede to something. You cannot walk away here without admitting any culpability. But it appears that the president is not willing to accept that culpability. If I say he lied, I would say I might be requested to prove intention thereof. It has not been proved at this point. The court might come out and say that on the probability of what was said and on the evidence that has been weighed as they are going into the substance of the matter, they might say that, Mr. President, you lied.
So
or you have been negligent.
It's an error.
Yes.
It's negligent the first time, you probably caught off guard. But when you go back and you make a subsequent a submission to the House, and if it is found then that that too may not be wholly truthful, what then? Have you deliberately misled the House, and what should happen in that instance?
I mean, if you get to a point where you realize that you have issued a statement that is erroneous and you still fail to backtrack on that, that then says that there might just have been some level of intention on your side to lie. If you continue with that, the problem is that the president wants to continue with the argument that says that will end up with the conclusion that I innocently lied. You can't get to that. It is undoable. You cannot square a circle. You've got to admit as a politician and take people in confidence that you are not just a calculating politician who only concede where it matters less. Concede even where you are vulnerable. Say to the nation that, you know, this has been complicated. I did not handle this very well. I misrepresented there. It is within your own right as a nation to judge me whether I've been intentionally deceitful or not. Leave it to that, and I think you get out of this. At least deal with the real consequences instead of trying to sustain a legally implausible argument that what to say you lied innocently and therefore we should not call it a lie. We're struggling here, Sakina.
We certainly are. And then you, of course, come to the developments over the weekend stemming from that letter that was sent by the president's lawyers to the deputy judge president of the Gauteng High Court, essentially asking for certain bits of the information that the public protector would then submit to the registrar to be sealed. Now, as you say, we are struggling because what, in your view, would be the reason for the president to try and basically defend or, basically hide, keep hidden the identity of the funders of his campaign?
Actually, this is where it becomes more controversial because the president is already dealing with the political consequences of it. Might be mishandling it, but the consequences already beginning to bear. He's running around having to deal with that, with the presidential spokesperson issuing statement after another. But now, when you start litigating in the protection of third parties now, it escalates issues to another level. It actually says that now there is even commitment to protect those third parties. And for me, legally, and I know I'm going into a controversial terrain of saying that if the president really wanted to protect those who donated, why can't they join and be friends of the court as part of this thing so that they can air their own position in these processes? It will be very difficult, I think, for the president to say to the court that protect the interest of those third parties who actually donated. I mean, did they intend not to be known? And if those third parties donated with intention not to be known, why is it that is the case? Why can't people take a principled position, Sakina, and say that I've donated to Ralph's campaign because I believe in his campaign, in his principles and so forth? Why is it that people cannot own up to what they are doing? Why is it that we still live in this era where we are denying that there is lobbyism that affect our politics, that corporations are lobbying out there. They're trying to go against legislations they don't like, that go against their own interest. And that is how funding is actually sometimes channeled. So people should come out and say that, look, I funded this person and for this purpose. If someone donate to me, they don't want to stand next to me, I don't think they are worthy donors. And the president should also start thinking about those donors, why they are not willing to take the political hit and defend the principle upon which they donated to him.
So
that for me is another issue.
This chess game, for lack of a better description of what's going on between the president, the public protector, and then there's also the Minister Pravin Gordhan in there infused into this whole milieu. So you have a situation whereby the public protectors, in the case of the Resars Rogue Unit, in the case of the Ivan Pillay early retirement payout, she actually opposed the interdict. And then she comes to this matter and she doesn't interdict. Do you think that took the president's team by surprise?
Well, if you lost an interdict in relation to Pravin Gordhan, which is a matter closely related with that of the president, it just becomes a judicial jamboree to try to further the same argument in another case on an interdict. You are just piling up cases that you are going to lose. It's better to lose without opposing than opposing and losing, because if you oppose and lose, the judges tend to go into the soundness of your reason. And that itself has been the difficulty that the public protector is dealing with. Terms such as inexplicable, irrational, difficult to understand. Those are basic concepts that are usually referred to when one look at the public protector's report. But I also think there's another controversy to this, that it results in conflict of interest, which is why we need full disclosure on this. If you look at the emails that have come out, there are intimation that Mr. Gordhan has been part of a fundraiser to President Ramaphosa. And then now they are within cabinet. And Mr. Ramaphosa is Mr. Gordhan's boss. There is nothing wrong in allies coming into cabinet. But if allies are so intimately linked to someone's political career as well, it can become difficult for someone to have to sanction them if they operate within the cabinet. I mean, if you take a step back and take a principled position, under what circumstances, given all that we know, and the relationship between Mr. Gordhan and Mr. Ramaphosa, under what circumstances will it be possible for Mr. Ramaphosa to objectively sanction Mr. Gordhan? Put aside the controversy as to who is the messenger, the public protector. We hit a dead end with this because already they are so linked and intimately linked in their campaign, in their political project. It might be a good political project, that's secondary to me. The reality is that it developed a sense where it might be difficult for the head of the executive to sanction a powerful ally within cabinet on matters that are also even linked to the fundraising. The whole thing, Sakina, it just shows us one thing. You are not going to stop the influence of money. The best thing you have is to have complete disclosure.
Ralph Mathekga, a political analyst, talking to us about a court battle between the president and the public protector, amongst other things. And we're going to take a break. And on the other side of that, we'll take a look at newspaper headlines and bring you the latest news.